I don't want to sound too alarmist, but I think this has to be said. 2023, which we are now just leaving, is probably going to be marked down as the year that the university system was finally no longer functional. The university system, as we have known it for 100 years, is now dead. And I think it can't be put any less alarmingly than that, because it's truly a monumental shift in our culture. When you have a president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, accused credibly of more than 40 counts of plagiarism, and the Board of Trustees and much of mainstream media supporting her, the university system is dead. A university system cannot withstand the problems that are arising from it within. Plagiarism is a serious problem. It's always been regarded as a very serious problem. It has been regarded in the past as a reason for firing someone, often on one count of plagiarism. But that is no longer true. If the president of Harvard gets away with the amount of plagiarism, if it's proven, then the university system is finished. Harvard is a prestigious university, and it cannot survive if it is going to allow this to pass. It marks the end. So a few words about plagiarism. First of all, really this is not much of a surprise. It's not a great surprise that someone should be found to have plagiarized an enormous amount. So in multiple instances, if someone is a plagiarist, then they tend to be a plagiarist over and over again. It's a career-long trajectory. And if you find one instance, then you'll probably find more than one. So it's not such a surprise. And it is a surprise, however, that it's been defended, that there's been some idea that somehow this can be allowed to pass. It can be just brushed under the carpet. That's the surprising thing. That's the new turn. That is the thing which is the death knell for the university, for Harvard. Now, I have to say this is not particularly surprising in a number of respects. For one thing, Harvard has been known for at least 30 years as a university that has had an almost absurd amount of grade inflation. It's been known for that for 30 years, so that one can't trust its grades, the grades of students that come out of the university. Grades are regularly inflated. And this has been known for so long now. It's not been trusted by other academics as to the quality of the students that it produces. But the other thing is, and this is also the main problem that is underlying all of this, is that Claudine Gay, as striking as this case is only the tip of the iceberg for academic plagiarism. Academic plagiarism, it's regularly found out and usually punished if it's found out in the sciences, but not in the arts. Not in the arts. Academics have been plagiarizing routinely for years now, many, many years. I could cite instances going back to my own time as a postgrad when I would hear about things that had been plagiarized, often from other postgrads. And that is a long, sad history of academia. So it's been going on for a long time. I mean, just to cite an instance, just one that I know quite well. In my own case, I published a paper. I think I gave the talk in 2003 or 4. The paper was published in 2006. It was on a problem in philosophy and epistemology, and it was a solution to a problem called the Gettier problem. And what I gave was the truth maker solution to the Gettier problem. It came out as an imprint in 2006. And since then, it has been plagiarized at least 4 times. In the last instance, in a journal which is quite prestigious called the American Association of Philosophy Journal, I think it's called that. I'll put it up to be clear about it. And that only just recently. So academics do get plagiarized, and almost all will have some story to tell about this going back years in the arts. This is not an unusual thing. So, and in the arts, it's not punished. It's excused. It's overlooked. It is pretended that it's nothing, which is a horrible position to put those who are plagiarized in. They are the ones who suffer from it, and they suffer from it in terms of reputation, being robbed from them, and all the rest. And it's not an unfamiliar story. The second part of this is student plagiarism. Now, universities have a hard line, usually, on student plagiarism. You can be suspended from the university, you can be ejected from the university if you're found as a student to have plagiarized your essay. So that hard line of the university is completely contrary to the soft line that is taken on plagiarism when it is committed by academics. Nevertheless, it is a hard line. But what actually happens in particular cases? Well, in the last, say, 30 years, my experience has been that, and this is reported from all around, so I don't think this is merely my own experience of this, but students who are found to have been plagiarized the academic will fail their work, saying that they have been plagiarized, saying that the essay has been plagiarized. It will be reported to the administration. The student will then complain to the administration, saying that, there is some excuse that they give. And then the problems start, not for the student so much as for the academic. If you make a charge of plagiarism of a student, then you are now on the back foot and you now have to produce this evidence. Now, sometimes that's easy, sometimes it can be tricky, and sometimes it can be very, very dispersed because sentences can be taken here, from there, etc. That means that the academic is now in the position of having to justify their judgment. And of course, that's legitimate in some sense. You should have to prove your case. You can't make a charge without proving it. But often the administration seems to turn this around so that the academic is really not just having to prove the point, but really being doubted on this point. And the university then seems to take the students' view on this matter to bend over backwards, if you like, to excuse them. Because often the students are fee-paying students, and the university wants to make exceptions where it can in order to keep the fees coming in. That is the dismal solution that the universities have for this problem. So often what happens is that the academic is under serious fire to prove that it is plagiarism on a massive scale rather than on a small scale in order to make the case. And this can lead to weeks and weeks of work for them to go back and forth to the administration, who are not really being supportive of the academics. And I'd be interested to know in the comments to this how many academics have found this to be the case. What has been your experience of it? I have some experience of this because I was for at least 10 years was the intermediate courses, that is the second, third year course coordinator. So many of these things would come onto my desk, and it was usually a very unpleasant task to begin to interact with the administration on this. The administration, who themselves had made these rules, did not want to enforce them, as they did not want to enforce other rules that they had imposed. Because if they imposed it, the university would lose those students' fees, and the university did not want to do that. So, this was all a rather bad situation, and it could sometimes, you get into the position where students had plagiarized, but where they would excuse it by saying that, oh, well, they just forgot to put the quotation marks in. This is exactly the excuse that was used by Claudine Gay, and it's an absurd excuse. Claudine Gay, I think, claimed that when she was found out about this, she would just have to go back to a PhD thesis and put in the quotation marks. No! That's not what she would have to do. She would have to put in the quotation marks, and she would also have to put in the citations that were missing, which is where she stole the work from. It's not just a matter of missing quotation marks, it's a matter of citing the original work. And then, when you cite it, if you're not directly quoting it, if you're pretending that you're talking about something, you have to rewrite, or you would have to rewrite paragraphs in which you show that you are paraphrasing someone else's work, citing it, and showing that you are discussing this matter. You are not merely saying what they're saying, you are discussing it. That is what academic essays are properly doing. You can't simply solve plagiarism problems by putting in quotation marks. If the quotation marks aren't there, that is a sure sign. But even if you've changed words to try to hide the fact that it's plagiarism, to disguise the fact that some kind of automatic checking on the internet will not find the original work because some words have been changed, even if you've done that, it's still plagiarism if you don't have citations for the work. If you've left them out and pretended that someone else's ideas are your ideas. That's at the root of this problem. Pretending that someone else's ideas are your ideas. And that is what is rife also in academia, where someone passes off someone else's idea for their idea. They've come up with it. It's their idea. That is what is become a plague in philosophy and in other areas of the arts, all through the sciences as well. It is an absolute plague, and academia cannot survive it. You cannot have this. Why does it happen? Why does it happen among academics? You can see why it would happen among students. Often it's the case that they don't go to lectures. When it comes to writing an essay, they don't have any idea of what they should be saying about this matter. They have no education in it at all because they haven't done any work for it. So they're in the situation where they have to steal. They have to. And they do. So it's understandable in that circumstances why this is a last resort, and they just hope that they don't get caught. But in the case of academics, the situation is horribly worse. So many academics, there is a sort of a ladder that has to be climbed. Academics start off in teaching assistant positions, often doing PhDs, but often having done PhDs. And they're in being miserably paid and miserably treated. Often their work is stolen by their own supervisors. I know from personal experience that can happen. So when you have this situation, the poorly paid and poorly treated beginning researcher needs to get to the point where they are in that favoured class of tenured academic or tenured track academic. They need to get to that position as quickly as possible because they are in a hell. In many countries, particularly, I think the United States is famous for this, but in many countries, being on that initial rung of that ladder is horrific. How do they get out of it? They come up with some great piece of work that will shake the foundations of their subject. Where are they going to get that from? Well, usually at that point, they don't know enough to do anything of that kind. Work of that kind of level is going to take them years to get to a position where they could do that. They're not going to get to that point for a long time. What do? They steal, obviously. And they wouldn't have to do that. And in the past, say in the 1930s or 40s, they wouldn't have had to do that because their position then was nowhere near as bad as it is now. Universities have made this problem by making the underclass of early career teachers in their art subjects, but often in science subjects as well, completely dependent upon doing work that is going to get them to a position where they can afford to learn things so that they know things and can genuinely contribute, as opposed to the early position where they really have to steal it from others, because what else are they going to do? So the situation, I'm sort of sympathetic to this kind of problem because it is terrible, and the situation that early career academics are put in is appalling. But the solution cannot be to simply cheat in this matter. It cannot be to pass other people's work off as your own. That is a horrible solution. And you can see why universities would want to turn a blind eye to it, because those people are doing most of the donkey work in universities. They are doing the big classes. They are teaching the big classes. They are marking the vast amount of essays that are associated with those classes. what time have they left for being the great academics that they really want to be and perhaps could be? So this is a situation that is largely created, and I can't see any way out of this for universities. Universities want to have their privileged class of academics who are freed from the chains of big class teaching, and when they are so freed, they will get on with their work. Most of those people who have risen to those heights, in my own experience, were career plagiarists and career, let's say, opportunists, careerists, if you like. So nothing in this system for 30, 40 years now has been going right. It's all been going downhill. And we've just reached the point in 2023. It's no longer sustainable. Why is it no longer sustainable? Well, the big reason is that all of these little instances of plagiarism, as many as there are, and there are very many, all of these instances of plagiarism are as nothing compared to what has come. And what has come is AI. With AI, students can not plagiarize, but can simply ask AI to produce an essay on a particular topic mentioning certain things, which they have been asked to do in a question. AI will then produce an essay, and it will be, in terms of grammar, flawless. In terms of spelling, flawless. Which most student essays are absolutely not. Completely flawed in grammar, horribly flawed in spelling, despite the fact that spell checkers exist and have existed for a long time. Despite that, doesn't seem to have made any difference to the fact that spelling is pretty terrible, and so is grammar. But when you have those things, then that's one of the ways that you know that someone didn't steal it. But it's not a guarantee, of course, but it's a way. But now you can have A-grade essays written not by someone who actually is a person, who the student is stealing from, but where the essay is simply generated by AI. That creates a problem where it cannot be detected. And so when you have that, the university system is finished. It's dead. It is, in Monty Python terms, a dead parrot. And the problem extends into academia, because if students can get AI to write their essays, so can academics. Academics can also get AI to produce articles on subjects. The article will not have been plagiarized by any obvious source. It will have been created by AI and is not detectable. When you have that, these things will flood into publishers, and the whole thing will lead into a complete collapse, because the publishing system is the only last gatekeeper of plagiarism, of original work, and of academic originality. That's where these things have to be caught. And usually they are caught there. It's one of the things that editors of journals have to look out for. And in my experience, they do. But in the future, in 6 months' time even, this may not be possible. And so what we're going to get is journals that are pushed to by young academics who are not writing these things but are just simply getting AI to produce them. Older academics who have completely, lost any ability to produce any work. And that is also, it's not just young academics that are the problem here, it's old academics as well. And there are many of those I know who have simply, in middle-aged alcoholism, just simply dropped any ability to even write a sentence. that is also exists. That's also a problem. And when you have that, if they're also being pressed to go on publishing, what are they going to do? They have nothing. So that is also a serious issue in academia. It's the older ones, often they'll steal from the younger ones. Often they'll take their work of their postgrads, whatever, and or put themselves as, this is completely rife, they'll put themselves as co-authors onto work that they haven't co-authored, but have somehow had some kind of supervisory role of the student. That's rife. That exists all the time. This is a complaint that postgrads, postdocs often make. It's often made in a scientific context, because in the arts context, joint publications are not that common. But I have to say, in the last 30 years, they have become common. You do see a lot of joint authored works, and you wonder, well, who did what? Who's responsible for what idea here? Sometimes these are legitimate, sometimes people have genuinely collaborated. I think that's probably the case most of the time that I've been aware of. But there are an awful lot of cases where it's very dubious. And I know that there are a lot of younger academics who complain bitterly of their aging professor who hasn't done a stitch of work in 20 years, putting themselves onto their paper as co-author, claiming that they have done something. Probably that was already the point where academia was finished. Probably that was. Academia, I say 2023 is the year that the university is over. It is finished with. It cannot educate anyone. The employees of universities are not doing anything serious. And students are not learning anything serious for a whole lot of reasons I haven't touched on here, but others will touch on. For a lot of reasons, 2023 is the year it's officially over, I think. But the fact is, the problems that I've been talking about go back at least 30 years. 30 years ago, 1992, 1993, but back even a little bit earlier than that, around the late 80s, the writings were on the wall. You could already see it. People were already saying it, that academic subjects were finished, that what students were being taught was rubbish. The students weren't being taught anything serious, and the students were in a position where they knew it, and they were helpless in this. In that position, if you're asked to then write an essay on something that has made no sense, that has been just gibberish from your esteemed professor, what are you to do? You could go back to the 1980s and this would be true. That's a long time for this problem to have existed. Now those completely untaught students then made their way by whatever means into academic positions, and then they did the same thing to their students, just teaching nonsense. Absolute, unmitigated, makes no sense at all nonsense. And that is what academia has been filled with. Not everyone, by no means. There is decent academic work that exists in universities. It did exist in the 1980s, 1990s. It exists now, to a lesser proportion perhaps, but it still exists. There are still good academics. But as a proportion of the total, in America, it has decreased enormously, but in other parts of the Western world as well. The amount of sheer chicanery of obscurantist nonsense being passed off as cleverness, of gibberish being passed off as some kind of legitimate, weird, syntactically nonsensical, but supposedly insightful ideas. That is what many people have been doing. How can academia survive that? How could it survive it? It took 30 years for this rot to finally get to the point where it has now, where the president of Harvard can be convincingly accused of more than 40 cases of plagiarism. But we did not get to this place in 10 years. We did not get to this place in 20 years. It has been more than 30 years of accumulating nonsense, of accumulating ridiculousness in universities to get to the point where we now are. Universities not only can't survive this, they should not survive it. People who throw their money away on a university education, all they're getting is a piece of paper. They're not getting an education, mostly. Mostly couldn't say one thing about what they have learned. Most haven't learned anything. Most haven't learned anything of any use or significance or worth. That's the majority. That's the situation we are now in. Most students are paying, and paying in America through the nose, through to the point of bankruptcy for life, for a work that is just simply gibberish and nonsense, that the student then has to pretend is worth something in order to justify the amount that they have paid for it. It's a scandal. It is appalling. It is absolutely unfathomable how this could have been allowed to get to this point. But it has. And it has because of the greed of the universities and the way in which they have mollycoddled this nonsense to get to where we are. 2023, which we are reaching now, right now, at the end, is the end of the universities. It is the end, the absolute end of the university system. Rest in peace for it. For 100 years, it worked somewhat well, up to about 1990 maybe, to be generous, up to that. Since then, well, everyone, I can tell you, in academia who was trying to do good work, everyone from as far back as 1980s and 1990s, early 1990s, was talking about this behind everyone else's backs, but saying it out loud, discussing it, saying what it meant. This is not a hidden matter. It has been out there, said clearly, behind closed doors, lamented, worried about. In my experience, every one of the people that I have seen rocket to the top of academia were involved in that scam. And a scam is what it was. Academia has been a scam for more than 30 years. It's time for it to officially end. 2023 is the end of it.